Nick here, Hampshire Outdoors and Survival. So, prickly subject today, knives again. Knives. Well, I've had some questions asked to me. So, for those of you out there that are, let's say, very experienced, know what you're doing, this might not necessarily be the video for you, but hey, please watch it, please enjoy it, you might learn something. And really it's aimed at beginners, people that are just getting into it, because the questions I've had was about sharpening, about maintenance, what knife is the best knife. So all I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you my own personal opinion and views. Right now, I'm not saying I know everything. I'm not saying what I'm saying is necessarily right for you. This is purely an individual choice and decision, and this is my hows, whys and wheres. There's guys that use different techniques to me and may like different styles to me. Everybody finds their own, so we're going to get into this and crack into it, try and make it as interesting as I can. So the first thing that you need to consider when you're buying a knife is what you're using it for, and that has to be your first question. What do I use it for? Because that's going to affect the quality of the steel, type of steel that the knife's made from. That's going to affect the size of the knife. It's going to affect the style of handle of knife. It's also going to affect the bevel. The bevel of the knife and the grind of the knife is how the blades form. Some blades, if you think of a kitchen knife, it's a very, very shallow grind from the spine of the knife to the edge, okay? Because it's designed to cut things like fruit, vegetables, meats, and so you want a very fine cutting edge that is going to slice through cleanly, okay? So that would give you quite a fine bevel. So to help you guys, and I hope this all comes out right because I'm jury rigging. So to help you guys out, here's your main kinds of bevels. Here you'll have a concave bevel. Alright, so as you see, it curves towards, so the spine of the knife will be back here, but the actual grind of the knife is concave. Now this gives a very fine cutting edge here, thickening to the blade. Now depending on how long that concave is, equates to how much strength there is in that blade, but this fine tip is always going to be prone to damage. These knives, right, concave knives, are very good for skinning, very good for game preparation and things like that. It's a fine edge and it can be made super fine. Next you'll come to a full grind, so it grinds all the way flat to the spine, and it's a very shallow grind. And as you can see with that, that's the sort of grind you'd find on a kitchen knife. I'm not very good at drawing, so you'll have to run with it. Next on from that, right, we've got a semi-flat grind. So the grind again is fine like this, comes flat up, okay, and meets the blade sort of normally 2/3 of the way back across the knife. Now that gives you a good knife for kitchen work, gives you a good knife for light work and that, because you've got the thickness here. You're instead of just being as thin as you are there, you've got a bit more thickness, but a bit of a shallower grind. Right, so the next one we'll come on to, and do again, please ignore my poor drawing, Scandinavian grind. Now Scandinavian grind is again a flat grind, comes from the tip of the point up to the blade, normally within about a quarter, and I say within a quarter of the width of the blade, so you're getting as much strength as close to that tip as possible whilst being able to maintain a fine edge. Next we have a tip grind. So this grind here is a super strong grind, however it's difficult to keep a sharp edge on it, right, because it's a very, very steep angle. And ideally, I mean, this is getting into preferences. I sharpen my knives normally at around 22 degrees. Okay, that works for me. That gives me a relatively sharp edge for what I want to do, and a strong enough edge to work the things I work. Some people go shallower, some people go steeper. But the last grind is a convex grind, and as you see, it bulges out. Now this sort of grind you'll find on things like axes, and I've got some of my knives out, so I'm going to try and demonstrate these grinds to you. Now, I often hear people tell me that that grind is, oh yeah, it's only good for axes. In actual fact, none of these grinds are bad. It's all down to preference. It's all down to practice. Every single one of these can be made razor sharp with time and practice. The concave, or so I say, convex grind here is probably the hardest one of them all to achieve, because the actual grind itself, as you see, is curved. So that when you're sharpening that, you've got to learn to roll it, okay, towards the edge. Now, another thing for you to consider is direction of sharpening. So whenever you're sharpening something, you are not smoothing out this super fine tip. Okay, that's a myth. Okay, you cannot make a tip that can slide between atoms. Right, even the great holy monks of fucknose, who spend 30 or 40 years sharpening knives on sheer silk taken from the finest silkworms ever made, have never been able to make a blade that will cut between atoms. What you're actually doing is you're creating micro striations or saw edges on your knife. Okay, and these micro edges, these micro chisels, slice through the material. Think of a hacksaw, think of a wood saw, but take it down to almost a microscopic level. Okay, they saw through, they remove pieces of material opening up between two edges. Even on a razor blade, if you take it right down using a microscope and look at it under a microscope, you're going to find it's got edges. So you have direction when you're sharpening. So you can sharpen towards the point or away from the point. You can do a flat sharpen, and I'll try and demonstrate what I mean about this in a minute. So if the point of the knife is here and you're sharpening with a drawing motion towards the handle, you'll create, like a saw blade, the teeth will fold back towards the handle. Now that makes a good cutting edge for a draw. So when you're drawing, you're actually drawing the material this way on those striations. If you sharpen it the opposite way, then the striations go the opposite way and it becomes a good edge for pushing. Okay? And if you sharpen flat, straight across the blade, straight off, you'll get this, and it'll give you an all-rounder. There are people that will sharpen a circular motion, there's people that draw towards, there's people that draw away. This is purely a practice and a comfort thing. Everybody finds what suits them. There is no right or wrong to it. Some are quicker, some are slower. You get into sharpening stones and so on, which I'm going to cover at a later date. And you can use a strop. So whenever you sharpen a knife, and I'll demonstrate it in a minute, you tend to create a burr. And the leather strop that you see the barber and you see people using, it doesn't actually sharpen. It takes the burr off. It removes the burr from the edge of the blade. Okay, so let's try and demonstrate to you some of these bevels to give you an idea of what I mean. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll look at this. So this is an axe. Okay, and I'm hoping it's all going to come out right. So as you can see, it's a very fine edged axe. Okay, and you've got the convex grind here. Right, so this allows that edge to be quite fine, and this is what I mean about people saying to me these edges can't be sharpened. They can. So you've got a very fine edge there, and the blade thickens very quickly. You'll find that on axes because it makes a very strong axe. The faster you get out to the width of the blade, the more strength in that axe. And so I will sharpen this, use it on an axe using a file, and I roll as I do it. So it maintains this curve. Be careful, run my finger across the edge. Alright, giving me my finish. I will then finish this one quite often, because I use this one for a lot of fine work, with a diamond. And that diamond edge just finishes it off for me, and it only needs to be a couple of passes. Okay, now when you sharpen, any item, and I'll demonstrate it with a file, you're moving material off and the material will fold over the edge onto the other side. That creates a burr. You always sharpen equally both sides, and then when you finish, by drawing this across a piece of leather, you remove the burr. It snaps the burr off, leaving you a nice clean sharp edge. And is this one sharp? Well, this always makes me laugh. Take a piece of paper, yeah, that acts as sharp enough. Now, you've all seen it on TV. A guy holds his piece of paper up, he takes his knife, takes it away. Super fine edges, wonderful things, absolutely wonderful things. I often wonder about actually the strength of the blade. And let's get back to something. That sawing edge, that's what you require. Okay, when you look at a knife for use, I'll demonstrate with the Leatherman. Okay, so the Leatherman, that's the blade, and as you can see on mine, it's quite a rough edge. Right, it's even got a few chips in it, but that knife for me gets carried. That's used for everything from cutting fuel lines on bikes to cutting ropes, string and materials, but it's got very rough edge. It will slice through anything. I've actually cut a piece of aluminium with that, with a sawing action. And to prove the concept, if you look at the other side, and that is the nylon rope, you need this to slice through. So again, it doesn't have to be super fine edge. It has to be an efficient edge, a cutting edge. It needs to be, when you slide that metal across something, the sawing action of that metal cuts into it. Farmers, right? I grew up farming, and I think every farmer I know sharpened his knife on the brick wall. Okay? Or you'd find an old piece of stone. The knife always did the job. Cuts blade into one and so on, does what he needs it to do. So anyhow, you're choosing a knife. You're going out to choose a knife. First thing to think about, what am I going to use the knife for? Am I going to carry it as an everyday penknife in my pocket? Okay, in that case, you can go for quite a simple blade, because you're not going to go hacking through the undergrowth. You're not going to go splitting logs with it. Right, so think about what you're going to use the knife for. If you're going to go somewhere and you want it to be a multi-purpose tool that you can batten wood with, you can split logs, you can skin game, you can strike your ferro rod with it, then you're really looking at something like a bushcraft knife. Personally, if you're starting out, I again, as I said on the last video, get the Mora. Get any one of the Mora knives. They're cheap, they're efficient, and they're damn good knives. Okay, they'll keep a good edge, and they'll do you well. But if you can go to a shop where you can handle the knife, the second thing beyond what am I going to use it for is how does it feel. So when you put it in your hand, does it feel comfortable? Do you feel confident in it? Does it fill your entire hand, or does it have areas that are going to rub with lots of use? Can you grip it firmly? Now, I like to quite often place my thumb on the spine of a knife to allow myself pressure to help me work the knife. I also like to be able to come down on a knife like this with my fingers out the way and use the edge finely for cutting, whittling, marking, okay, working leather. So it's not just the handle of the knife. Think about the entire knife, how you can use it. If this was a very thin blade, it would be hard for me to shrink down on it. That's why I made this knife that way. And yes, it is one of my knives that I've made. The grind on this knife is a flat grind, and it comes back just over, well, yeah, just over a third's what I aimed for, because it was quite a thick piece of steel. So I aimed on that knife being quite a chunky knife, and again, where I was just starting out making knives, what I should have done was made that blade about that long, okay, but I didn't. I worked it back to that, even put a little groove in there so that I could strike a ferro rod from the front. Okay, why? You don't normally use the back, otherwise the ferrocerium tends to damage the blade. But again, if I was sharpening that knife, I use a stone, a small stone like that, has two sides, has a coarse side and a fine side. Okay, that's a wet stone. So I'm not going to do it here because it's not very nice, but normally I'd spit on it, and then on my knife I like to draw away from me 22 degrees, and I could draw down there, and again not a massive amount of pressure required. Okay, you shouldn't need to apply masses of pressure when you're sharpening. In actual fact, you're going to damage the metal and wear the metal even more. Light even strokes on the both sides. And again, the bevel equates to the use. What are you going to use it for? I use it for fine, I use it for skinning, I'm using it for light tasks, I use it for heavy tasks, I use it for food preparation. Think back to the bevels. Personally, if you were just starting out, like I say, the more a knife with a Scandi grind, that's probably one of the best all-rounders. Even the British Army survival knife pretty much has a Scandi grind. Okay, it's very slightly concave, very slightly. If I lay that on there, you might be able to see there's a very slight concave to it, and then we've got the final bevel there. Okay, and that bevel is on the edge. So again, when I'm sharpening that knife, I can see my bevel all the way along. Now, one of the things I tend to do with a knife like this, I change the angle down the knife. So I have quite a steep angle here to here, okay? Because if I'm putting it on something and I'm batting it through, I want that steepness to split the wood, okay? I then to start to come finer and finer as I come up the blade here. I have a very fine edge there, which you can see on this one has become chipped. I've got to do some work and tidy it up there, and then I come to a very steep bevel on the tip. So if I'm pushing it in something, I'm prying, I'm levering something out of the ground, or I'm going to go and lever something out of a piece of wood, I've got it. If I'm working a piece of leather, or I'm working a piece of hide, or I'm skinning an animal, I can come up, I can use the tip for an incision, or I can use this fine edge just to pare away and keep control and push. Okay, closer to the blade that you can become safely will give you more control. Okay, when you're first starting out, I wouldn't necessarily suggest working down on blades. Practice, get used to the feel of it. It's all about pressure. You've got to be careful at all times. My Lansky knife has a hollow grind on that. It's lovely and sharp. It's quite a thick blade. Does everything I want as a pocket knife. So again, that's nice. The other thing I will say, so we'll do another video on sharpening. There's a couple of bits of sharpening kit I want to get out and show you, but again, I have an oil stone here. Okay, has a rough edge for repairing your blade, taking the chips out, fine edge for finishing your blade, and that's an oil stone. And never ever, if you're setting your stone up, it is either an oil stone or a water stone. It can't be both. If you've put oil on it, it will always be an oil stone. Okay, it's as simple as that. If I put water on this, all it does is gunk it up. It ruins it. That one there is a Norton combination bench stone. They've been made for hundreds of years. As you can see on there, they're very expensive. You don't necessarily have to buy a Norton. That one was bought as a gift for me. I've had that about 15 years. It's very good. A lot of the survival shops and most hardware shops, you'll find a small sharpening stone like that. Brilliant bit of tool. Carry it in your kit. If you're carrying axes, that will work for your axe as well, for doing repairs on the go. And if you're sharpening an axe, it's one of the few times that I will actually use a circular motion, and that will just, as you can hear, hone in an edge on my axe. I'll put that down safely down there. and a lot of people don't like them, but it's a diamond stone or a diamond sharpener, and these are encrusted with diamonds of engineering grade, and you can use that for sharpening a knife. Now this you'd have to be dead careful with. It's quite short, it's quite thin, and running that along a blade always runs the risk of catching a finger and slicing it. And when you're sharpening, it's probably one of the most dangerous times for you. You're moving that edge in proximity to fingers, hands, and again, one of the reasons you don't use a huge amount of force is if you slip, you're going to slice yourself. So what I tend to do is I will lay that down on a surface, light even movements to sharpen it. And again, that's my techniques. If you're, I see a lot of guys using circular motions. That's fine. It works. It will do the job for you. But find what works for you and practice it. Okay. My dad, when I was a kid, gave me an old dinner knife. Well, it wasn't a dinner knife. Actually, it was a butter knife. And he said to me, when you can put a good edge on that and maintain a good edge on that, I'll buy you a first sheath knife. So I got my first sheath knife at the age of 13. Okay, bear in mind it's a very rural and agricultural area, and I was taught how to respect and maintain it. So equal pressure, equal work, both sides. Look after your knife, and I don't just mean look after the edge. Look after the entire knife. Okay, a lot of people forget. You know, if you've got a wooden or a bone handle, you need to take care of it. You need to look for gaps forming. If you're getting gaps forming, quite often it's the wood drying out. So you can treat that. You can treat that with an oil, and you go back to the old premise. Years and years ago, I was taught that you use mineral oil on minerals, so a mineral oil on metals. You use organic oil on organics, woods and organic. Okay. In fact, actually, you used to say mineral for mineral, vegetable for vegetable, and animal for animal. So if you've got a bone handle and that, you want something like neats for oil, which you can get out there for treating hooves and so on. Now, that does change slightly for me. If you are going to use your knife in any way for food preparation, do not ever use a mineral oil for cleaning and preserving your knife. And the reason being, all metals are full of micropores. Again, it doesn't matter how well it's finished, there are always micropores in there. Mineral oils are quite often very toxic to people. Okay, so if you're then using that knife for your food prep, there is a chance that over a long period of time you will end up causing some sort of toxicity build up in yourself. Okay, it is quite acceptable to use a good quality vegetable oil to wipe your blade down, right, and then dry it. Keep it dry, keep it clean, get the muck off of it. Okay, if you've been preparing game, and plenty of you guys out there will have done, and you get home, you think you've wiped everything down, you get home, you take your knife out, and in every little nook, crevice there's going to be blood. Right, so you then spend ages cleaning that out. You get it all out. Okay, look for the gaps, and there will always be gaps in joints and so on. So there's gap in there, there's gaps down there. Okay, they need to be kept clean, free from debris, and free from things that can become harmful to your own health. Okay, if it's my Leatherman never ever goes near food, never ever goes near food. And the reason it doesn't go near food is I quite often do repairs on my motorbike. So I might get brake fluid on it, it might get engine oil on it. So again, I don't want the contaminants coming into contact. Simple as. That is a working tool. I do have food prep knives that I take out in the woods with me. And again, be aware of what you're cutting. Some plants are toxic. Don't use the same knife to then go and make your dinner. That could be a bad day. I often wonder how many times people have said to me, oh, I went out, I did a camp and oh, I was rough the following day. I must have had something bad, and I think to myself, yeah. Well, what were you doing with your knife? The same knife you used to do your food. So have two knives. A lot of people use the Opinel pocket knife for doing their food preps. Good little knife, but there's nothing to stop you from having any knife to do your food prep. Just keep it separate from your general working knife. Anyhow, so maintenance on your knife. Keep it clean. Keep it sharpened. Don't over sharpen it. See, some people sharpen. Every time you sharpen the knife, you're wearing it out. You're taking metal away. Okay, you're reducing the lifespan of the knife. I've seen knives over the years that are completely different shape to what they originally started out as, because it's just years and years and years of sharpening it. Sharpening it when it needs to be sharpened. Okay, it's not cool to sit in a camp spending 5 hours rubbing a blade with a sharpening iron. It looks cool. Yeah, it's great in all the movies. You know, you sharpen your knife. You really want to impress me. You sharpen your knife, then you shave your head bald. That'll impress me. But I see guys sometimes when I'm out and they sit there for hours and hours and hours, and I'm thinking, well, if you're not getting it sharp within a few minutes, you either really abuse the knife, or you're sharpening it completely wrong, or you're just sitting there doing it for the sake of doing it. And again, it just wears your knife out. Why do that? It wears out your sharpening item. So, little and often, do it when it needs doing. Oh, what else can I say about knives? Not really a lot. I'm going to do an in-depth sharpening video at a later date. I'm actually going to set up some of the... I've got various bits of kit for sharpening knives and axes, and it will take me an hour to set them all up and show you, but I will go through it. But hopefully that helps. Find your own technique. Go on YouTube. There's plenty of people doing knife sharpening techniques, and I don't care what they say. No one of them is perfect. They're all depending on what the knife is, what you're using it for, and who the person doing the sharpening is. The one thing I will say you need to develop when you're sharpening is a bit of patience. Don't get frustrated by it. Don't rush it. Don't use force. Okay? Practice. If it's not quite right first time, go back and have another little practice. Okay? Get yourselves a cheap knife to practice on. Right? And learn to sharpen that first. And then go to your quality knives and transfer the technique over. Okay? Other than that, I hope you're all having a great day. I hope all is good with you. I hope you're all keeping fit, fine and funky. I've had a pretty good day today. I've been busy up the woods yesterday. Wasn't a lot to film there, unfortunately, because it was mostly manual labour tidying things up. But yeah, hope it's all good. Second canal video out this week. Yeah, looks quite a good one. I know they're not everybody's cup of tea, but we will be getting out to do some overnighters shortly, and we'll be doing some more camp tasks. But guys, take care, be safe, love those you love, forgive those you don't, and as always, light and love to you all. Take care, Mickey out.